Hey, today we're going to talk about ancient Rome, focusing on the Roman Republic. So Rome starts off as a city, moves to a republic, and eventually an empire. And here you can see a map of Rome in the orange, kind of at towards its peak power in 117 AD. You can see Greece and some other places that we've learned about in the past as well. Rome was located on an Italian peninsula along the Mediterranean Sea. It was founded on its location because of the Tiber River, which gave it fertile soil for farming, and the mountains around it protected its city from an invasion. Rome's going to go on to become one of the greatest civilizations in the ancient world. They're influenced by the Greeks and the neighboring Etruscans. And they borrowed a lot of their ideas from other cultures, especially Greeks. You can see their religion, their architecture, their alphabet, and their military is all very similar to some things that the Greeks have. Their gods are similar to the Greek gods. Their architecture, as you can see in this picture here, has a lot of columns. You can see the alphabet is very similar to the Greek alphabet. And then the military, they have the swords, the spears, the shields. They have the phalanx formations and all these other formations and training that they learned from the ancient Greeks. So the Romans were very good at taking ideas of other people and really working on them, enhancing them, and making them their own. Rome started off in about 900 BC as a small city. Eventually, it's going to grow to a big city, about 500 square miles, by taking over neighboring land. But in 600 BC, the Etruscans, as you can see by the red dot on the map here, took power in Rome and ruled over Rome using a king, and the kings were generally very ruthless. Well, in 509 BC, Rome had had enough. The kings were very brutal. They were murdering people. Rome rebelled against the Etruscans, driving out the Etruscans out of Rome, and they executed Tarquin the Proud, who was the Etruscan king who ruled Rome at the time. By 264 BC, Rome had gained control of the entire Italian peninsula and had become much more powerful, and from there they're going to expand throughout northern Africa and Europe and even parts of Asia. After removing the Etruscan king, Rome formed a republic, which is a form of government in which people choose their leaders. They vowed never to have a king again because they had too much power. However, after Julius Caesar, they're going to return to a king in the form of an emperor from that time forward. So they're going to go from a king, which they hated, to a republic in which the citizens are going to choose the officials and then later return to an emperor, which would be like a king. Now in Rome, only freeborn males could vote. So Roman society is divided into three groups: the patricians, which are at the top, the plebeians, which are the middle class or the common people, including some poor people, and then you have your slaves and other non-Roman citizens at the bottom who had very few rights at all. So at the top are the patricians. These are your wealthy landowners. They controlled most of the land. The male patricians could vote, but not only could they vote, they would also hold key military positions in the army, and then government positions in politics as well. And they made up 5% of the Roman citizens, so not necessarily 5% of Roman population, but 5% of the Roman citizens, which would be even a smaller number. Here you can see kind of a state that these patricians would live in, very large, very fancy, and even by today's standards, pretty relatively nice. Below the patricians, you have the plebeians. These are your common people, farmers, shopkeepers, and peasants who at times had a pretty good standard of living in Rome, but really toward the end were more lower class than they were middle class. These people could vote, they were citizens, they paid taxes, they served in the army, which was considered an honor at the time, but they couldn't really hold any important positions either in the government or in the army, and they were required to pay most of the taxes. 95% of Roman citizens were plebeians, and you can see in this picture here a daily life where they live in these crowded little apartment complexes inside of Rome. And at the bottom of society, you had the slaves and other non-Roman citizens. Now, these slaves were generally captured in war that Rome won. So there wasn't necessarily a huge slave trade the way you think about it with the Atlantic slave trade, but these are typically prisoners of war that were sold into slavery. And this is going to have a huge impact on the plebeians because these slaves are going to take most of the work. Roman government is a republic. You have different branches, just like we have branches today with the legislative, executive, and the judicial. The executive is the consuls, the legislative is the Senate, and then you have the praetors, which are the judicial branch, which we won't really talk about. So as we said earlier, 509 BC, they kicked out the kings, they became a republic, and this is a place where the citizens can elect their leaders. So it's a form of democracy, but called a representative democracy. The top people, as you can see in this picture here, are the consuls. They had 2 consuls. It'd be similar to a president in the United States today, but when we think of the president of the United States, we think of a president having much more power than what the president of the United States actually has. So 2 consuls are chosen to serve together. They're responsible for enforcing laws, enforcing policies. They would lead the army. They'd organize the government, but they themselves would not actually be the ones making the laws. There's a lot of restrictions on the consuls. They could rule for only 1 year. And they shared it with another consul, and they had to advise the Senate and be responsible to the Senate at all times. Both consuls had to agree on an issue or it was dropped, and both of them had veto power. So this made things getting done very difficult in the Roman Republic. Now, although the consuls are the most powerful people and the most powerful positions, the actual most powerful branch in the government is the Senate. The Senate's composed of 300 upperclassmen called patricians. Plebeians most likely weren't part of this, although I think there were some times where someone could rise to power, but it was very unlikely. Senators were appointed for life, so they didn't really have to respond to the demands of the people. And once again, patricians are your upper class, plebeians are your common people. And because there could be an occasional consul disagreement or at times things would be difficult to get things done under the Republic, they did have a law that allowed them to grant dictator temporary power in case of emergency, such as a war or a major revolt. And a dictator would have complete power similar to a king, but they could only keep it for 6 months and they were supposed to give it back. However, at sometimes it's a little tricky, as once you had that taste of power, you wouldn't want to give it back completely. This led to a lot of class tension in the Roman Republic between the patricians and the plebeians, and sometimes you'd have the slaves and non-citizens also get involved in this tension. Plebeians in general felt the Senate treated them unfairly. They lost work due to the slave labor, pushing them out of business and doing their work for them, or driving prices so low that they couldn't compete. Trying to maintain order, the plebeians did give in to the plebeians the patricians did give in to the plebeians at some points. In 493 BC, the plebeians elected their first plebeian tribunes. These are people who represent the plebeians in the Senate. They didn't really have voting power, but they did have veto power, and they would debate on the side of the plebeians and try to protect plebeians from laws that were harmful for them. In 451 BC, the government wrote down a code of laws for all citizens to follow called the 12 Tables. This is a code of laws that promised all citizens protection under the law. However, the word citizen here does not apply to slaves and people outside of Roman citizenship. So these both help the plebeians. However, you're going to see the plebeians are going to be upset, and one person is eventually going to rally the plebeians on his side, and that's going to be Julius Caesar, and eventually bring it into the Republic and turn Rome into an empire under his nephew, Augustus. All right, thanks for listening. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.